Hello, welcome back. Now, you may be more used to our newsreader Danielle Sinnott telling you about religious freedom in Kazakhstan or some such issue like that. Well, the occasion of your moving to this My Story segment, Danielle, is this book that you wrote. Your first book?
My very first book, yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Every Heart's Cry, The Search for Unconditional Love and Emotional Connection in an Imperfect World. I read some of your story in the beginning, in the preface there. Can you outline that for us?
Yeah. I guess, I didn't grow up as a Christian, so my journey, I guess, really was wrapped in disconnection. My parents split up when I was 2. My mum and I went to live with my grandparents, and they both remarried by the time I was 4. At about 6, my dad just cut contact and I didn't see him again. My stepdad, who I'd got along with quite well up until that time, became very emotionally and sometimes physically violent. I remember being sworn at, called the equivalent of a prostitute, and having my head slammed into the wall, those kinds of things. And so my life growing up was very disconnected. As a result of that abuse, my mum actually sank into a very deep clinical depression, was hospitalised for some time, and couldn't show me any affection. I remember at one point trying to hug her on the couch and her, not even being able to cope with that.
It's actually quite normal, isn't it, for someone in a vulnerable position like that to disconnect, to completely emotionally withdraw.
Yeah. I think it's survival, Kent, and I think the danger in that is that as a child, you don't understand why significant people in your life turn against you, or when they withdraw. A little child interprets that as rejection or abandonment, or not being loved.
Are there other strategies you think people use to disconnect or escape? I mean, substance abuse comes to mind, alcohol or other drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the danger in the disconnection too, Kent, is not just the escaping into, whatever. I mean, our whole world's disconnected. We get on Facebook, and that's really a disconnected connecting. We get into addictions, we get into withdrawing if we've been hurt. We don't want to be hurt, so we withdraw from connecting on a deeper level. And it's not what we're called to do. But the danger in all of that is the generational stuff. What am I setting up in my disconnection for the next generation?
As in when you're parenting your own kids? Is that what
absolutely.
You're saying?
And unfortunately, when I grew up and I had some things to deal with, I had also learnt to disconnect as a child during the abuse, and I'd watched my mother do that, and it's what I knew how to do. So, guess what? I hit a breakdown in my early ministry, actually. And I did the same thing. I shut down, and then my kids had to deal with that. And I came to a point where I had to make a choice. I had a friend of mine who was brave enough to carefront me and bring the issue to my attention.
Carefront you?
Carefront.
Is it like confronting with care?
Yeah, absolutely. And how we approach people when we've got to deal with an issue is really important. And I could have chosen at that moment to stay in my disconnection and my issue, or to step out of that. And praise God, I chose to grab God's hand as tight as I could and to step out of that and to break that generational stuff. Can
I just take you back a bit there, Danielle, because I think you were sort of hinting that you were still struggling with this issue of disconnection after you met God. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So yours isn't one of these stories where suddenly the skies opened up, there was an epiphany and everything fell into place and you were suddenly warm and connected and relational with everyone. It's not that story, is it?
Well, yes and no. Like, it definitely was. I certainly had a conversion experience, and I did all of that stuff, and I learnt to forgive my stepdad and my mum, and we have a wonderful relationship now. I just love my mum to bits.
And those are important first steps, forgiveness.
It's huge. It's it's not just huge, it's integral. You cannot heal without forgiveness.
Now, how does this relate to God in particular? Because I understand in your book, yes, you do talk about human relationships a lot, but you also talk about disconnection and connection so far as God is concerned. Can you unpack that for us a bit?
Yeah. When I looked at my own life and where I disconnected and why I was disconnecting, I thought, why do we do it? But then where did it come from? And I found that it actually began in Eden.
Right.
And the very first disconnect that we had was, of course, at the fall with Lucifer.
Because before that time, of course, the cool of the evening, God would come and walk with Adam and Eve,
and
They were in a relationship, okay, but
With
obviously
God and
something
each
happened when sin entered, yeah, okay.
That's right. And you know, when we chose to, I guess, in essence, follow Satan instead of God, and we chose not to believe God over Satan, our relationship was severed. And I thought about that in the spiritual context. You know, our relationships were severed, our relationship with God and our relationship with one another. And all down through the generations, we've had that pattern of disconnection. You know, our relationships were never the same since Eden. And really, we actually are grieving that.
But God promises reconnection,
He
doesn't He?
does promise reconnection.
There's that language of reconciliation or even adoption or our marriage ceremony, you know.
Yeah.
These relational metaphors used all the time in the Bible.
Oh, absolutely. You know, by this you'll know that you are my disciples, that you love one another, carry one another's burdens, as in fact you were doing. When Jesus came and reconciled us on the cross to Him and to one another, when He forgave us, He called us to connect. He called us to connect with one another. He called us to connect with God. And His future for us is total reconnection in heaven, that restoration of Eden, if you will. It's easy to connect with God because He loves us unconditionally. His love is perfect. His love is safe. But He also calls us not only to love Him, but to what?
Love one
to
another.
love one another.
And that's where the connection comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the book also talks about how do we do that? How do we trust when we've been hurt? Why is forgiveness important?
Yeah. We're out of time, Danielle. I can't believe how fast it's gone. Where can people pick up this book?
Yeah, they can go to my website, braveenough.org.
Okay. All right, there you go. You can check out that website. And no, thanks so much, Danielle. I really appreciate you presenting a little bit of your thoughts from here. And
yeah, thank you.
I think even men are probably getting something out of reading this.
Look, we've had a lot of feedback from men, and you know, my heart and who I am authentically, I think, has been poured out in that book. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for your time,
Thank
Danielle.
you.
We'll be back straight after the break.